I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself so that you know how I came to Houston and came to this book idea. I'm from Washington, D.C. originally, and I am not really of immigrant stock. My mother is from Mexico City, came here when she was 16, which is now a long time ago, and came here because of love, and so doesn't quite fit the typical immigrant paradigm, but what I grew up with was a love of Mexican culture and a feeling of comfort with it. My dad was Jewish from a pretty old family from the last century, so he too did not really feel like an immigrant, but loved that culture and educated the kids in our family in Jewish history, Jewish ethics. The real influence that pertains to this book is that my parents fell madly in love in botany class at the University of Maryland, freshman year, and that was huge. That was huge in the 40s. That was an interracial marriage, and it could never last, and they were eons and cultures and continents apart. Well, it lasted and it thrived, and the feeling that I grew up with as a child of his parents is that more is more. There was no culture clash. My mother didn't convert but became the Jewish scholar in our family. My dad loved mariachi music, and he learned Spanish from a diagram that my mom, who's a scholar, charted out on a cocktail napkin for him. And apparently some people can learn Spanish that way. So it was this feeling that this is fun and you get double the life experience from two cultures that really informed me in my travels. And then I came to Houston after working a lot in Latin America as a reporter. And the thing that kept me in Houston, I was one of those people who thought I'd be here for 2 years. The thing that kept me in Houston was that it's a wonderful place to be an entrepreneur. So I've worked about half my career for big newspaper or media corporations and alternate that with working for myself. So you can do that in Houston, harder to do that on the East Coast. But that Houstonians are amazing storytellers. And so for a journalist, that is catnip. And the most compelling stories I found after some time here were those of recent immigrants. Houston, as you know, is a magnet for the big wave of immigrants that came after 1965, and it was just heaven for a reporter. The stories were very dramatic. But as a freelancer especially, you kind of have to define what your interests. No one's assigning you, so you kind of learn more and more about what you really care about, what compels you. And for me, I realized, a long time after the fact, it was functionality. It was not dysfunction. It was functionality. So I was writing about people who were very traumatized, people who were really slammed by loneliness and feelings of disorientation and all the things that immigrants and refugees suffer here. And yet, the undercurrent of that, there was a lot of functionality. And then as I became a parent, and as I became a Houstonian, and a lot of my friends were immigrants, I began to really be able to crystallize, to focus on some of the things I had written about for years that captivated me, that functioned, that at first I thought, oh, that's not for me, that's not my culture, I'm not allowed to do that. And then I started asking, why not? Why can't I save money the way my Vietnamese teacher does? I took years of Vietnamese lessons with limited success, but I learned a ton from my Vietnamese teacher, who was perfectly fluent in both American and Vietnamese culture. And she had a savings club where she had a great job, she had security, she had a retirement account, and yet she met month after month, year after year with the same club of people, putting aside a little bit of money to have that cash at the end of the year. And if it works like a charm, you don't make 1 cent of profit. If it works perfectly, no one's run away with the money. So you have exactly as much money as you saved, which sounds like a small thing, except that it's hard to save extra money, as we know. And it's hard to not squander and fritter. And there is a certain dynamic when you have all of your friends, your entire reputation in one room, that makes you, keeps you on the straight and narrow, as we say, in my money club, which is now starting its 5th year. So I began to start seeing that some of these things can be plucked out from other cultures, and they fulfill goals that we Native-born Americans, or I'll speak for myself, I as a Native-born American, was struggling with right now. These are the goals that I want to achieve. So thrift, success with a public school. My kids go to a public school, and they're going to go to public school. Some people, particularly many Asian immigrants, and not all, have a lot of skills for getting the most out of a public school system. It's because in their own cultures, you need those. Those are survival skills. Hispanics, Mexican immigrant women have fewer premature births and lower infant mortality than American-born Caucasian women. It's called the immigrant paradox, and it's not entirely explained, but I saw things in other cultures that I wanted for myself, and that was the origin of this book. It was anecdotal, it was friend to friend, it was, I want that. As I started to court the book, which in a nutshell is about 7 really smart things that particular immigrant groups do in the United States that American-born people want for themselves. As I started to report, I realized that although these practices have not been written about very much at all, the underlying logic has been written about a great deal, and recently in the health literature. There is something, as I mentioned, called the immigrant paradox, and that is the really counterintuitive fact that foreign-born people, even though many, many of them are poor, come from trauma, come from disruption, often don't speak English, are marginalized, and as you know, many of them are not even participants in our system. They don't have, they hesitate to call the police if they're crime victims. They don't take advantage of services that they're entitled to. Many immigrants are so marginalized, but as a group, they live longer than native-born Americans. As a group, they seem to have fewer incidents of mental health problems than Americans do. As a group, and specifically with Mexicans, they have better infant health, and the recent research shows that Mexican immigrant women in particular have fewer premature births. So they are doing something right, and it's still in play. We're not positive why it is, but there are real implications for our healthcare policy, for business, for Americanness, for American culture in these models of people in our community who are doing something right. So that's what the book became, and there are lots and lots of footnotes in the end to show you the research here. But as I said, the original idea was friend to friend. And I want to tell you about one practice which I'd never heard of, which is thriving, and then open up to questions because I can go down the list of some of the other practices, and I'm also very interested in who of you have had experience with some of these ideas, many of which were American ideas once upon a time. Many of them were practiced by not our parents, but our grandparents, and forgotten as we became affluent, because these are the practices of people that didn't have institutions that were reliable, didn't have governments to do what governments are supposed to do. So they had to rely on themselves and on their relationships. The practice I want to tell you about is going on in Houston, all around you. It's called an OGBO, O-G-B-O, and that's not a proper pronunciation, but it's an Igbo word, and Igbos are a Nigerian tribe very well represented in Houston. Many of them came here in the 70s because of an oil boom, and they wanted higher education, and then because of political turmoil, couldn't go back, and slowly went through the process of saying, I guess we live here. But they kept something from their communities in Nigeria, and often, even if they were urban people, they had family villages where everybody, no exceptions, was in an age grade, or by. An age grade is, if you were born in the year 1952, welcome to the lifelong club of people born in 1952. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you're in. You didn't sign anything, but you're in. There's the 1962 ORBA, the 1969 ORBA. And at first, when you're a kid, it just means your parents kind of point you and say, that kid's in your age grade. But then, when you're 7 or so, all the 7-year-olds go and they sweep out the village square. And there's a beautiful book whose title I can tell you about, or how to find it. It's called ORBA. And it's a photo book of this going on right now. And you see kids who are in rags and kids with their brand new Tough Skins pants. And they are truly all together sweeping that village square. When they get older, they build huts, maybe for widows who don't have someone to build a hut for them. And then, as young men, the males become kind of a militia. And I don't hear a lot of abuse of this, but the idea is that it's giving them some power to patrol the community and strut around and protect while being under the control of the elders, because it's a gerontocracy. It's a society ultimately where the elder people run things. And again, it's one of those clubs that if you eat right, you too may be part of the ruling class of a Nigerian Igbo village. Then, as you start to earn a living, and even if you go far and wide to Houston, for example, you continue to do things for your village, and the Orbas talk to each other, they Skype, but they also go home and they decide on what is our project, what's the 1964 group going to do for the village. And in many parts of Igbo land, they are the people who provide services. They provide roads, street lights, clinics, schools. And the dynamic here is what's so interesting to me. It's not charity. It's not good deed doing. No one has their name on top of the clinic. You have your year on top of the clinic. The thing that keeps people intensely invested, personally and also in terms of money, in their communities at home is competition. It kills you to think that the 1958 Orba was the one that paved those streets. You just don't get over it. And if your Orba, for example, provides an electric generator, which one man's Orba, he's the head of a criminal justice department at American College. The apex of his adult life was providing that generator, okay? You don't, again, put the Claudia Kolker generator. It's the 1972 Orba. It's a group, and the closest analogy maybe is the Boy Scouts. I've looked around, but Boy Scouts are not, first of all, it's not a lifetime commitment, and there's no one telling you to do it. The engine is competition, but also the idea of reciprocity. It's not charity, it's the idea that we are young, we will be old. We are doing what our elders tell us now. Someday we will be the elders. We give the clinic because we are part of this community, and it's reciprocity. And to me, that's a more durable idea than good deed doing, philanthropy, even what we call giving back after the fact. There's this feeling of a cyclical nature that sticks around, combined again with intense competition, which I think has great application in American life. And so that's one example of a practice that worked great in the old country. The Nigerians here are now trying to figure out, how do we educate our kids? They don't have a home village. How do we educate them in this joy and lifelong friendship and teamhood and excitement of competing forever with the 1976 Orba? How do we do it? And they are trying to figure it out right now. And so this was the end of my book. This is one of those practices that is evolving right now. And there are several examples of how it's popping up in American culture. So that's one example of an idea that is very intact, accomplishes extraordinary things, and also brings great satisfaction to the people who practice it. As I gathered all these ideas, as I said, there are about 7 and 7.5 with the Orba. As I gathered them again, I thought these are ideas that work for me. I adopted all of them except for the Orba. All the other ones, which are not in transition, are part of my life now. How to save, a thrift club, how to mother a mother, what you do to prevent postpartum depression, which almost does not exist in the poorest of Mexican villages, how to eat, how to get a family dinner for a working family on the table, hot, fresh, nothing canned, cooked that day, delivered, $8 for a family of 4. Someone in Houston is doing that. That's members of the Vietnamese community, including Vietnamese attorneys and doctors. How to be a good neighbor. Why does Little Village in Chicago, which is in the bottom 25% economically, it's the biggest barrio in the Midwest, why does Little Village have a 5% asthma rate when the average white neighborhood in Chicago has an 18% asthma rate? why does it have in the lowest 10% of crime? Why did people in this barrio, which is poor, non-English speaking, why did fewer people die there in a horrible heat wave a decade ago than in the neighborhood next door? The answer to that is a practice, a kind of a plaza culture of hanging around in front of your house and walking. And this has there's been some epidemiological study of the effects of this interaction, the neighborhood effect in health. And this is something, again, that's escalating. So I try to enfold all of these practices into my life in Houston. And I'm a little bit evangelical about them because the other piece of it is they are fun. And that is one of the big takeaways from this book. The first is that all of these practices, different as they are preemptive. They bring out the best in you early rather than patching up the worst in you after the fact. So they're preemptive. They're from cultures that have no doctors, no institution to protect them. They're preemptive. They involve asking for permission. I need help now. I will step up and give you real help later. I'm not talking about a gift basket or a gift card from Amazon. I will come to your house in the first 40 days after a baby and help you be happy and relax and help you with whatever you need, clean the kitchen. So preemptive, permission to ask for help because of the certainty that you will give it back. There's that profound reciprocity. And the third one is the power of a party. And I'm not talking political parties. I'm talking about the power of bringing people you like, who like you together. Everyone's kind of spiffed up. No matter how they feel, they're on their best behavior. There's some food. There's some laughter. But you're doing a task that's hard, whether it's saving extra money a month, whether it's sweeping the village, whether it's scraping together money for that clinic that maybe is hard for you to afford yourself. When you have a lot of people together who are laughing and singing and consciously being their best selves in a party, you can get an extraordinary amount done and you look forward to it. And that is really one of the keys of the immigrant practices that I wrote about in this book that I've tried to unfold into my own life. And again, I've done every last one of them, and I'm here to tell you they work.